Welcome to the world of stand-up. What's up, Doc?
How's it going?
Good, man. Thank you for taking time to come chat here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Your wife put me in a full Nelson the other day. She's like, "Get my husband on your show," and I go, "I've wanted him on my show the whole time. It was out of sight, out of mind."
She probably literally did because she does that from her jiu-jitsu training. So
Yeah, I didn't want to roll with her because I'm like, I would lose for sure.
Yeah.
She's got like a very spider monkey. I love, dude, Amelia, your wife, Amelia Egbert. What's the name of her her company?
Your Human Intuition is her production company.
Okay.
Yeah.
That you're associated with that too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's your guys' company then, or
Yeah, we work together. So I'm like her assistant in that regard. I carry stuff, set up lights.
Amelia, it's so cliche. You have like the hot buff guy as your assistant. Like, come on, that's slow clap.
She's great.
Slow clap for Amelia. Yeah, she did some interview stuff, docu-style interview stuff for me. Mm-hmm. Really, really impactful. She has a great ability to kind of pull stories out of you. She's great.
Masterful with her interview skills.
Yeah.
If you want that emotional connection, she's best I've seen.
Yeah. Well, she's also a film director, and you've starred in one of her films, correct?
Indeed.
Were you clothed?
I got to stay closed. Yeah.
Okay.
I asked her, I'm like, can I do a nude scene? And I just didn't fit with the script. So
She's like, well, we can pretend. And anyway.
yeah.
But enough about Amelia, because we could talk about. I should get her on the show too. She'd be a great one.
She's good. Yeah.
So you have we're friends, and we've hung out without microphones in our faces.
Yeah.
And there's been some things that I've really enjoyed about your story. So you, as a doctor, came to Utah right at the start of COVID, right?
Yeah. So I left a job in like February before it started. And so the plans were in place to move here. And as I'm interviewing and moving, COVID enrolled. And so we started my first job here in April. So just weeks after the whole beginning of that. And it was tough, to say the least.
Yeah.
Socially, especially.
I bet.
Because the whole world shut down and nobody wanted to play.
Yeah. I remember meeting you at a Lion's Den event. Mm-hmm. I got to be real. I was kind of intimidated by you and your wife.
She's intimidating.
Well, the two of you together, you're a dynamic duo in that way. There was a very don't fuck with us.
That's right. Which is funny because we love people and we want to be with everybody.
No, you guys are great.
Yeah.
You're super friendly. Like you've had us over for dinner, and it was a totally fun experience. But I loved hearing those stories from you about the challenges in medicine and the Hippocratic Oath and the things that were being compromised because of things that were happening, and we're now in a very interesting time relative to COVID.
Yeah. And
the changes that we saw happen. You were on the front lines with vaccines being released and having there be new policies that are coming over, where I remember you telling me, and I would love if you're willing to kind of go into this,
Absolutely.
Your experience of like scratching your head of like, what's really going on here? Tell me about that when things first started coming out as far as like medicines and COVID and things, and the vaccine, your experience as a doctor from an internal standpoint, what was that like?
Sure. So to go back just a little bit further, we moved from Washington State, and the first known cases were in Seattle area. So we were just over the mountain from there. And so just in those first few weeks, I know there was all this anxiety. I'm at the gas pump. I'm like, do I touch the handle? Like, what's going on? And so that was an immediate fear because we had no idea. And then roll out a few more months, I'm starting to watch how the reaction from media and everything else was coming along. And I started to see things that didn't match. And that first year, I was in this weird place of having to follow protocols that my hospital and CDC and et cetera, rolled out, and looking at it thinking, this doesn't make sense at all. So that's challenging when you see things from a perspective of medicine that I learned, for decades that don't match what's being said by the experts. And so there was this dissonance, essentially.
Sure.
And so when those first vaccines came out, I was really anti-compliance. I didn't want to do it. And I was also torn because I work in a hospital with old people, like face-to-face. And so in the early days, we still didn't know that this was what it is now. We thought this is a potentially deadly disease, which in certain circumstances, sure. I didn't want to be responsible and I didn't want to take the vaccine. And so I had this conundrum to deal with. Did my research, which was limited at the time. And I chose to get the first dose of a Moderna. And I said to everybody, I'm like, I'm going to get the one dose. I'm not going to get the second one because my calculations was 86% whatever effectiveness, those numbers that have since dissolved. But at the time, that's what I knew. And I'm like, 86 versus 90, 2 doses is twice as damaging to me. I'm like, I'm going to do one.
Yeah.
So I got one. They tried to take a picture of me getting it. And I said, no, get that camera. I'm like, get that camera out of my face. Like, no, I don't want to be
What an
associated.
interesting thing to want to do. Like,
they were celebrating.
The flex of like, doing the vaccine. I've always found that to be so curious because, first of all, I need to make it clear that as a person, I'm not anti-vaccine at all.
Sure.
I'm pro-health. And things like natural immunity have always been real, and they will never not be real. Mm-hmm. And when everything was going down in this crazy last few years, I found myself, and I know I'm not alone in this, internally at war with like wanting to not rock the boat because it takes pressure to tell somebody like, I'm not putting my mask on.
Yeah.
When you're walking into a store and they're up your ass about it. And it takes pressure to have everybody around you be like, you should do this, and to legitimately in my bones be like, I don't really think I need to. Mm-hmm. I don't have a confirmed test to prove this, but I fully believe that I got COVID like months after everything, like in July after the shutdown in 2020. Sure. 10 days, horribly sick. It was a different type of sickness. I lost sense of smell, and my taste was weird for 6 months after that.
Sure.
I don't have a test to prove that, but I'm pretty sure I had COVID.
Yeah.
And having said that, I didn't really ever get sick again throughout that entire time. But watching kind of the gaslighting and the other things, like I could only imagine as a medical professional, like what that's like. It's such a weird thing. Part of me is like, when I say I'm not anti-vax, the cucking for big pharma that is happening in the name of politic right now is truly absurd.
Yeah.
You have companies like Pfizer that, on record, historically speaking, are the most fined. Pfizer is the most fined company in the history of the United States for lying to its customers. Biggest fines ever levied by the United States against a private corporation. Mm-hmm. Are they publicly traded? To a corporation, regardless. Sure. Is that company. And all of a sudden now we're just supposed to believe that everything that's happening is benevolent and that it's here, and and then they got all the useful idiots on board to shame and everything. It's mind-numbing. I can't wait to have 10, 20, 30 years of context after the fact to see what we really find out about what was going on. Because I know what we're going to find out. I already know it.
We all do, yeah.
Greed, this was planned, high levels of purchasing. I mean, it's just as easy to buy a doc as it is to buy a politician. An entire thing just for the sake of more control.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think now is a lot of it too, as well as it's the continued pushing. I mean, I saw a thing recently where Dr. Fauci was saying that the pandemic's not over yet. I'm like, this guy is holding on. He can't let go because he's screwed for all the lies and the gaslighting and the things that he funded and everything that's going to trail right back to this dude. Yeah. He can't let go.
Will it ever come back to him? In reality, come on.
I hope for the sake of just justice that it does. Because if you look even further into this dude, and you might know more about this than I do, he was very instrumental in a lot of the stuff when it came to AIDS back in the 80s.
Oh, absolutely.
He was the guy over the NIH that there's a law. This is the most crazy thing. I can't believe that this hasn't been repealed. But supposedly there's a law that says if you work for a government-funded organization like the NIH and they do research towards any medicines or breakthroughs, that you get a piece of the patent if you're a part of it as a scientist or a researcher for the sale of that into whatever. So like Fauci got a cut of all those AIDS medications that they were working on to make it that way, and it was delayed. There was like a 3-year delay because he wanted to make sure that, and this is all documented, it's been deemed a conspiracy, but bananas. This guy has been at that game as long as he has and that nobody knows?
Well, I think a lot of people know, and it's been, 40 plus years since then about, and nothing's come to light.
Well, the things that have come to light have been silenced through.
Well, they've come to light. We see it. We know it, but no repercussions.
There it is.
And there won't
no
be.
Accountability.
And that's what's going to happen with the COVID situation, because the pockets are deep and everyone that has the pockets is in power.
Yeah. Dude, you were a Mormon at one time, right?
Sure.
Okay. So do you remember the book, The Mormon Doctrine by Bruce R. McConkie?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So there was a big hullabaloo about that book back in the 80s because Bruce R. McConkie, who was before his death, he was an apostle of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church. And he had written in his book, The Mormon Doctrine, that the whore of the earth was the Catholic Church and that they were responsible for all these, evil and whatnot. And he got in a lot of trouble for that. They had to pull that from his book. I'm not in that faith anymore. I don't have any sort of thing. But I've kind of thought that where he missed the mark was, I think that pharma is the whore of the earth. That the amount of damage that has been done to society in the name of medicine and health by those massive entities, we will never know the depths of how much damage it's done to society on a global scale. They have good medicines and things that work, but there's so much. I mean, look at the opiate epidemic.
Billions of dollars in their pockets. Yeah. No repercussions.
None.
They paid some fines.
So many deaths.
Those fines are like business expenses.
Yeah, it's like a bar tab. Oh, we got to pay another $2 billion. Yeah, that sucks. Well,
yeah.
There's a friend of mine that he lives in Cincinnati, and the Midwest is just. He's had 7 of his high school friends die from opiates. Mm-hmm. Yeah, who cares?
Like the opiate, whatever you want to call that, epidemic paved the way for this fentanyl, which is now coming in across the borders, which is illegal. But without the groundwork being laid, with all the addictions to opiates, where would the fentanyl come into play? So you can see that combination there.
Right.
So interesting.
It is interesting. I only bring that up because I wanted to kind of set the stage with you. You clearly have a different viewpoint on medicine, and you understand health in a different way than I think a lot of doctors are willing to acknowledge, and I love that. Sure. Like you clearly do support and espouse Western medicine, but you're also open to other modalities of medicine. Tell me about this new deal you just opened up relative to men's health.
Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. It is within the Western medicine model. It's a testosterone replacement therapy company.
Okay.
Now, why? Going back to pharma real quick, there's a book, and I don't remember the title, or the premise was basically this. 50% of medical research has been tampered with to the point of being unreliable. 50%.
Really? Half.
And that being from poor studies funded by pharmaceuticals who have bias, of course,
right,
and poor reporting, et cetera, et cetera. So 50%. Which half?
Right. Do you know?
I don't know. And nobody really knows.
That's a funny thing. You look at the numbers that were a part of kind of going back into the COVID era. The CDC was putting out this nonsense, and now they've reversed it. And it's like, yeah, well,
what's true?
Who's telling the truth now?
So it destabilizes the faith in the system. If you had a partner or a business partner who 50% of what they say is a lie, you trust nothing.
The irony of that when half truth is still all lie.
Exactly.
To a normal mind.
It becomes an all lie.
Yeah.
And especially if you're thinking about this. So from a medical perspective, if I'm to trust the standards of care, trust the medications, trust the systems that have been in place, and half of it potentially has significant flaw, and I don't know which half, what do I trust? And how do I move forward to treat? You come to me and you say, hey, I need help. And I'm like, well, I've got this. They told me it helps.
Who's they at this point?
Yeah, right. The they.
Well, and even there, it's like I saw a supposed doctor it was on a morning show or something, literally saying that obesity was genetic and there was no way around it. That diet doesn't matter, exercise doesn't matter, you're going to be that way, and that's the new thing. And she was clouding it that it was some sort of standardized. She has proof now through this. And I'm like, how in the world do you have an MD after your name when you say something nonsensical like that? We have years and years and years of showing the diet, exercise, sleep, environment totally affect how your body responds to fat.
Yeah.
Diet specifically, diet and movement, those two things.
Yeah. Unpopular opinion here. She's right.
She's right that it's genetic.
Let me tell you why.
Oh boy, here we go.
All those things are true, technically. But sociologically, culturally, etc., they're not powerful enough. Because the momentum of our society, the momentum of families, the momentum of habits. I've dealt with this for my whole
So the genetic
career.
part then isn't legitimately cellular genetics.
No. It's not like there's
cultural.
nothing you can do about it technically. Like, technically, yes, you can do something about it.
Okay.
But the genetic component is more complex than simply
I
your
could believe
genes.
that. I'm on board with that.
So I'm saying she's right,
But
but different than the way she means it,
right,
I believe.
right.
Because I've been in the world or in the fitness industry. I've owned gyms. I've been in medicine. I've been in wellness programs and systems, et cetera, my whole career. Almost nobody sticks to the diet. Almost nobody sticks to the plan. Someone comes in to me overweight and they ask me for help. They will not do it. 94, 96% of the time.
What do you attribute that to?
It's the deep-seated habits of humans. It's culture, like I said. It's the why is everybody addicted to their phone? And they know that it causes problems with distraction and
How dare you?
et cetera, et cetera. Right, but
It does.
Guilty.
Yeah, we're all guilty. We can be like, man, this thing sucks my life away as we continue to scroll. Right?
Same with diet and exercise. Like, where you got to eat a carnivore diet and only eat fruit and exercise high intensity XYZ, and you have to get 8 hours of sleep or whatever per day. We all know it. Nobody's doing it.
Okay, so how do we break that then? Because clearly it's a combination of things. Like there is and again, I'm not a doctor, I just play one on TV. So there's a moment where you have to recognize, okay, so living in a caloric deficit is how you lose weight. And there's a bunch of other aspects of what that means that create variables in speed and effectiveness and metabolism and all that. But generally speaking, if you eat less calories than you burn, you will lose weight.
Absolutely.
Okay, so then how do we then, from a society standpoint, change the identity to where we can actually break those bad cultural habits? Or is that just too big of a deal? Because it's an individual thing, but it's like one person can make a difference. I mean, you look around, I joke with my wife about this all the time. It's like you go to Lifetime Fitness here, and it's a more expensive gym.
Yeah.
It's very nice, has a country club vibe. Most of the people that go there have resources, and so there's very few unattractive people that are there. It's not a good litmus test for general public for America. There's fit women, fit men, and you have there's people that are working on it stuff, which is great to see, of course. But it's that's a different experience. So how do we then turn the planet into a Lifetime gym where everybody is fit and cares and has habits and good diet and all that?
Well, there's so many factors in that. One, you said it's an affluent or it's a higher scale gym.
Right.
Well, how many people have means in population? You're self-selecting, or at least that audience that you're looking for is a selected audience. They're the ones that are
sure. But what I'm thinking, so what are the variables then that make it so that those people congregate in a place like that? Because it's not just means. I've met plenty of very, very wealthy people that don't care for their bodies.
Sure. But the vast majority of people that are healthy tend to have corollary capacities. They're successful in other areas of life.
Okay.
It's like the way you do one thing is the way you do all things. So that kind of goes with it. Just look at statistics, though. Populations, the obesity rates are just continuing to climb. We're at 40% obese and 60% overweight or whatever the numbers are, but they're climbing.
Right.
Regardless of all this wonderful knowledge, wonderful resources that's available to everybody. Anyone can go to a gym, essentially. You can go to $10 a month, Planet Fitness, adequate to lose weight and get in shape. You can go and choose things at fast food restaurants that can put you in a caloric deficit. Carnivore diet, for example, it's one that I use as my North Star. You can do that at McDonald's. You can just order patties. They do that for you.
Sure.
So everything's available, but why don't we? Similar to the phones. You know that if you spent less time on your phone, you'd be more successful in XYZ areas of life. But you won't do it because the phone is always there.
It's so fun, man.
It's so fun. So is all the yummy food. It's so fun.
Yeah.
And so that goes on and it goes on and it goes on and it's everywhere. And
well, at what point do we reach that to where like we look around as a society and we go, this is a problem?
we're already saying it. I've been saying it for 15 years.
I know, but we're the annoying ones.
Sure.
We're the annoying people that are in shape. And we're saying like, look, people, what are you doing? And then we get judged as like fat phobic or whatever. It's like,
Sure.
no. Like I have people I dearly love in my life that don't care for their bodies. And I'm seeing the effect of that. It has nothing to do with any sort of shame or trying to like I've had close friends of mine crawl up my ass about my social media every time I make a comment about health. Or there's something that is just so completely absurd that I make a joke about it. Like Lizzo being on the cover of some health magazine. It's like, we're there now. Like, and I make a joke and it's like, I'm not joking at Lizzo. She's an incredibly talented woman that clearly has cultural relevance. And she's a great artist. But I'm making fun of us for saying, oh, that's healthy now.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're lying to yourself. Like, it's so funny. I found, like, on TikTok, I'll get on these little things, and I didn't even know this, but there's, like, a scale where unless you're at a certain, like, weight or size, you can't talk about fat problems. And so, like, if there's, like, a woman, and this I laughed so hard when I first found this out. I'm like, the amount of mental gymnastics it took to establish this sort of thing. So, like, if you're, like, a 200-pound woman, and you're speaking on, or man, and you're speaking on the issues of weight. Somebody that's at 300 pounds, they trump your opinion because they are higher up in the scale.
Sure.
And then they get trumped by, the bigger you go, the bigger you are, the more weight your opinion has about that. And I'm like, this is odd to me.
It's
like,
victim politics.
It so is, yeah.
So whoever has the most victim points wins.
We should make a board game like that, just to kind of poke fun at it. The Victim Olympics, man. Or something.
There's so much, and that's a conversation for hours. The way people perceive what's new and what's true and what's relevant.
Yeah.
Everyone's out there playing pretend. I don't want to play pretend with you. So if they're like, oh, let's pretend this is beautiful and put it on a magazine, I don't want to play that game.
I love that perspective. I love that perspective.
If you want to pretend you're a cat, I don't want to play pretend with you. I have a 3-year-old. I'll play pretend with her for a little while, but when I get sick of it, I'm done. I'm not playing pretend anymore.
Yeah.
So if you want to come and pretend you're something you're not.
I wonder where that turned, where all of a sudden we became willing to entertain that delusion.
They call it an identity.
So, I mean, it's a cultural thing, though. If you look at, like, even 10 years ago, it wasn't nearly as...
No.
I mean, you look at 10 years ago, Kevin Hart cracked a gay joke that made it so he couldn't host the Oscars.
Whatever, yeah.
And that's gayness. Like he cracked the joke that was in bad taste back then, but it wasn't nearly as like dangerous back then to make that joke. They had to come from our time and look back at what he was saying at a time where things were different. It's not that he would have done what he said he would have done about his son being gay.
Sure.
Back then, the transgender and a lot of this sort of other thing wasn't even in the radar. It was like this small fringe of like, nobody cared, and it's become so prevalent in this sort of way where it's like, I wish I could understand from a societal standpoint how it got to this point. Because I don't believe, like, and I say this with love, like I have daughters and that have their challenges with those sort of things and whatnot. So it's not out of judgment that I say that, it's out of curiosity. Like I want to know how we got to a point where we're going to in some way try to act like that's a biological thing. Or that it's and it's not exactly what it is, which is just dysmorphia. It's a delusional thing in the mind, not that I was actually an alligator that was born in a human body or whatever. Because that's legitimately how they speak about this.
Yeah.
Like, dude, my daughter, I have a bit in my act about this. My daughter went to prom with an elf,
who completely identifies as an elf.
Completely,
yeah, of course,
ears and everything, like had the prosthetic ears and everything. And when I asked my daughter, like, what? If the elf was a biological male or biological female, my daughter told me that was none of my business. Like, this is where we're at now.
Until they say it's your business, and then you have to respect it.
Of course.
So it's like children playing pretend. And it's like, oh, I'm changing the rules mid-game so I win.
Jordan Peterson talks about. I think that you're onto something there. Jordan Peterson talks about when you can't win in the normal hierarchy, you create an alternate hierarchy to which you can win in,
and change the rules constantly to continue to stay ahead.
Yeah.
So it's just.
Have you ever come across that in medicine? Like anything with?
Oh yeah, it's always in psychiatric wards or otherwise. So yes, a lot. I've seen a lot of really sad cases with people that have had dysmorphia. I've seen the end of the road. It's like they talk about, it's always the like coming out where it's like exciting and new and fresh, but they don't show you 10, 15, 20 years down the road when they've had completely destroyed bodies. They're multiple suicide attempts in, they're drug addicted. And I've had trans patients die in front of me in the ICU because of the complications of that life.
A transition surgery type thing?
Transition surgery and drugs and all the things that go with it if you look at the statistics.
Okay, so bringing back in the idea that big pharma is the whore of the earth.
Sure.
I read a statistic somewhere that said every transgender child equates to over $3 million in profit per kid for big pharma.
Because of complications, because of treatment.
Drugs, surgeries, complications. Like once you transition, you're on that pill and that thing forever.
Sure.
Because your biological body doesn't normally handle that. It's not the same. You have to continually modify it. And the most dangerous thing as somebody that has daughters that is involved in this. I mean, my kids aren't transgender. My one daughter's a pansexual, and the other one, she has they, them in her bio, but she's never really been open about what she is other than she came out as gay when she was in her early teens, and then she transitioned to saying she was a pansexual in 16, 17, and now she's 20, and I think I don't know. No. And anytime I've tried to like lovingly as her dad just get to know her, like it's a very walled off thing, like she doesn't want to talk about it.
Sure.
So this part of our society is very real to me. Like I have firsthand experience of this within my family, and so I'm curious about it. I want to know. Yeah. And because it's one of those things where it's very difficult to hate up close. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to dislike and disdain from a distance. And so when it comes to a lot of this, I don't have any sort of like disdain or anything. I'm more curious about this, but like I realize I can see how people can be totally bothered by this and think it's nonsense and bullshit and just, become
There's two sides of it. To go off of that, there's a quote I love. It says, if you can't say you love someone, you don't know them well enough yet.
I like that.
And that's just my rule of life. So like, I'm not talking about my perspective on an individual basis. Individuals are humans and they have feelings and they have an experience. And that may be dysmorphia, that may be identity, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll be compassionate and love them to the ends of the earth. And there's a creep in cultural and societal conversation that has implications for others. The pretend, that's a term I use. So similar to like Jordan Peterson, he gets upset about compelled speech. Yeah. I don't want anyone to tell me what I have to do in any way, first of all, but especially what I say and how I be. So if someone wants me to call them certain things, I don't want to play that game because it opens the door for the rule set to get shifted and shifted and shifted. But as an individual, I understand that. But as a whole, I think it's dangerous.
Yeah. Well, I had, I don't know if you've had the chance yet to listen to Russell Brand on his most recent episode on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Clips, but not the whole thing.
It's fascinating. Those two guys, I mean, just verbal sparring back and forth is really, really
Brand
interesting.
Is brilliant.
He has these long-winded rants that are just so articulate and brilliant. I'm like, wow, that is beautiful. But he presented an idea that I hadn't considered that actually makes sense because when you step back from the elephant, you can see that part of what's been pushing this sort of narrative and this idea, it's been coming from media, and it's been being supported by government. It's like the press secretary for President Biden has said, we have, more representation in Biden's cabinet for, these different, LGBT and trans and the whole thing, right?
Right.
And that what has happened is that basically from the left, they've created such a lack of trust in the agency of government. Nobody believes the CDC is right anymore. Nobody believes the FBI isn't compromised anymore. Nobody believes the CIA isn't just doing clandestine stuff and spying on Americans. Like, everybody has a really more than healthy distrust of the government. And a part of it has happened because if you look at, and this is both for Republican and Democrat politicians, but it seems to happen more on the Democrat side, where they blatantly lie about certain things and they get caught in their lie and there's no accountability for it. And the way that they sort of like do the little shell game is they bring in the cultural aspects of love and acceptance for these new types of people and these new ways of life. And they push against your resistance and they tie your resistance to your lack of trust in the government so that they can have a direct line to your willingness to be compassionate to your trustability in the government.
Sure.
And Brand was describing this. I'm like, I could see that. This is like a shell game. It's like, we're going to bring all this stuff into a government. We're going to have, Rachel Levine's going to be our health secretary for the United States. We're going to have all these other, we're going to have a black lesbian press secretary. We're like, there's going to be all this stuff in our face about these alternative lifestyles. And if I reject what a transgender woman says in a position of government, it's not that I'm rejecting her as a voice for the government. I'm rejecting her as a transgender person.
And all transgender.
And all transgender. So it's like this really sort of like nefarious.
An ist of some kind.
Yes. And that makes sense to me. That like when you can't call the press secretary an idiot that can barely read without it being something associated with her race and her orientation or her whatever, however you describe that in the right way.
Pawns.
Right.
That can't be touched.
That to me makes sense. It's like the ruse has to end at some point, I think.
Sure. And is it ending?
There's momentum that's kind of pushing back.
It feels
hard.
like it, but maybe that's the algorithm we're exposed to because we self-select.
True, but there's also like very loud voices like legitimately doing, work in that area. It's like,
sure.
Matt Walsh has become quite the figurehead in that world. He had that documentary, What is a Woman, where, there's not a better deadpan in the world than Matt Walsh when he just asks a question, just sits there, just letting them trip over their own words, Sure. And then he's been actively a part of, making it so that if children have questions about this stuff, like just we're going to make them wait. Like he's been heavy in certain states making there be laws against that. And even, so it's like the tipping point. It's like guys like Matt Walsh are kind of breaking through the rough here, and other people will be willing to speak up and stand up
but he unfortunately is tied to one side, the right, and therefore everyone on one.
Well, that's why it's become so politicized and like polarizing politically. Like they're saying he's some alt-right tiki torch guy,
which then negates anything that he says.
But it only
to them.
But that's what I'm saying. Like there comes a point. It's like there's a lot of red pilling happening, and that's where it's like okay, so it's like a tipping point. It's like this thing where. Like when you fill up a glass of water and you get to the very top and like it kind of there's like that bubble at the top and then it breaks and it just flows. I think we're close to that as far as like, and the beautiful thing is like it's not that any of us really care if somebody wants to live a life like that and really does feel those things. Great, go do that. There's no problem there. But let's have it be in its proper place.
Yeah, leave me out of it.
Yeah,
leave me out of the game.
Don't act like words are violence.
Sure.
Like we don't like. Anyway,
it's
talked a lot about this more than I thought it would.
So there's a few circles I want to come back to.
Okay,
big pharma, big food.
Yes.
So to come back to the obesity comment, all this food that's in our faces, of course, that's run by big food.
It's a great way to describe it.
And so big pharma and big food are, bedfellows, so to speak. To bring that back even further to what I'm doing with testosterone is this. Like, this is one thing I trust as a treatment that can make the most difference.
Well, there's a reason why it's demonized, too.
There's a part of that, which is interesting. And that's where I'm going to go next in a lot of my content that I'm producing is, like, dispelling the myths on the natty versus juiced.
Well, I don't even mean that. Like that's kind of that's like a boutique argument.
It is, but it has other like ripples.
Sure.
Unfortunately.
But I'm referring more to like there are voices that are trying to tie toxic masculinity directly to testosterone.
Yeah.
And say that men don't need testosterone. It's what makes you angry and makes you mean and makes you this and that. Basically trying to betify everybody.
Of course.
So that there's no, strength within men.
Yeah.
That's how I see it anyway.
Well, that's part of this. That's why I say the natty juiced argument has ripples, and that's one of those, is that juiced is therefore the evil version of testosterone. It's the aggressive abuse, like jacked roid rage guy. Toxic masculinity as a constant or a consequence. And therefore testosterone being the thing that fueled that, well, testosterone as a whole is therefore evil, or therefore damaging, or therefore fueling the negativity of men.
As a highly educated person, doesn't that just remedial argument annoy you?
It's silly.
Because like that's so stupid.
Yeah.
That's like, what do they say? Correlation doesn't mean causation.
Yeah.
Like it's like, okay, so those two things aren't the same, even though you're trying to draw a line in it.
Not even close. So I'm going down the road of testosterone as a business model. First of all, in the world of medicine, it's one thing that I've seen over and over and over be very effective, anecdotally, and research-based. Fine. Am I going to read the studies on it? Yes, but do I trust all the studies? Not really. But Big Pharma doesn't have their hand in that because it's not a profitable drug.
Really?
Not at all. It's cheap.
Testosterone's cheap?
Very cheap. Well, relative to paying $1,000 a month
Sure.
prescriptions,
Sure.
like some others, but it's inexpensive. It's not patentable.
How is it created?
Derived from plants.
So like when you because I've had a subscription to injectable testosterone for years. I had testicular cancer and lymphoma for a bit, and I didn't address my testosterone levels until about a year and a half after kind of everything had changed for me, and it was bad.
Yeah.
I was 270 pounds, 265 pounds. I was exercising a lot, but I was just like the treadmill queen. Like I was just go sweat for whatever. And actually, it wasn't until our mutual friend John Matson, I went into his gym here, and he just laughed at me. He's like, "What are you doing? You expect to get ripped like doing that?"
Yeah.
And he had me start lifting weights and stuff, and I was able to now, for my age, learned that working out like a football player is what I need to do: bench, squat, deadlift, sprints, things like that. Long distance cardio, don't need it.
No.
And then that happened. I started finding that my recovery was way too long, and I got my levels checked, and they were nothing. And I started, taking injectable tea. So I fully believe that it's needed. Like our food robs us of our testosterone. Like the culture we live in, like makes you look at the levels, like they're even worse now. You turn and you would know this. I'd love to have you correct me on this, but like 30 years old, they start to drop. And
yeah, so they say like 1% to 2% per year. So it can go down dramatically in the next, 10, 15 years. You're down significantly. Now, I've been seeing people come to me in their young 20s that are low, which is really fascinating.
Yeah.
If you look back like 50, 60 years ago and look at corollary age groups and numbers, we're 50% what they used to be at the same age, culturally.
So what do you attribute that to?
It's so many things. It's going to be nutrition, where anytime you hyper consume sugar and other inflammatory things, the seed oils, linoleic acid, and all these others that are unfortunately very unhealthy, vegetable oils, that's like in everything. Right. Those things have downstream effects and therefore results in lower testosterone. You've also got softer living. When you go out and really get after it in the gym, that stimulates your body in such a way that says, hey, we need to be prepared for this. If you're not doing those types of things in life, you're not going to be prepared because your body adapts. So life's easy. We don't need to be strong, combative, assertive men.
That makes sense because there is a hormonal response when you fight or box
Everything
or jiu-jitsu or whatever.
A corollary reaction.
Right. Lifting
so
weights,
you go lift weights, your body says, oh, you're going to do this. Let me prepare for that. You do it again. They're like, okay, let's keep going. And you get stronger and stronger. Bone density increases. Well, testosterone is the masculine hormone. It masculinizes. And if you're not stimulating the man to be a man, shuts off.
Yeah.
So if you can sit there and just, get your dopamine through your phone and you're eating shitty food and
well, dude, I heard an interesting statistic because I think this is directly connected. Testosterone is also a big component of sex drive.
Huge.
So I'm trying to remember what the exact stat was, and so if I'm off,
Sure.
I'm principally tried to provide accurate information. They were saying that basically like 60% of young people under the age of 30 haven't had sex in 2 years.
There's a statistic that goes along with that that's even worse. It's like 30% of men between ages 18 and 30 haven't had sex at all.
Really? Well, that's the reason why that's, my understanding, so detrimental is for a number of reasons. Physical, of course, that means that there's not a hormonal response, or they're just nuking their system with pornography, which is most likely what's actually happening. And the way that affects dopamine and the instant response of that. And it makes it, you have this sort of fantasized experience of sex in this place that doesn't include the imperfections of what actually happens when you have sex with, even with the hottest chick. There's going to be she's not going to have every flaw gone. So that tweaks the brain. And then additionally, like the social aspect of the chase and of dating and of courting and of trying to get laid, man. Like there's something you learn about yourself as a dude when you go out and you try to meet women and develop those relationships.
Let's go back in time. Back to
please
30 years ago, 40 years ago. Who was in your pool to date?
30 years ago, 30 years ago.
Well, yours specifically or anybody's. You only had access to those in your immediate radius. Therefore, this many men, this many women.
I love how you had all 5 fingers open when you said that on your hand.
Only had, this many. That's now. This isn't then. So the thing is you had almost an exact amount. So there was a lot higher chance of pair bonding.
Right.
Well, now.
I love that you use that phrase. I have a follow-up for you about this.
Okay. So I dated 7 years ago, and I had Tinder. That's how I met my wife. And I could set my range to however far I wanted. So no longer was I just limited to those that I could immediately come in contact with, but I could set the thing to anyone. Well, the statistic on that, online dating, is that 20% of men have access to all the women.
Yeah, 80% of the women.
Because they won't swipe right on the other 80% of men.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that same thing, and so what that has done is it has given those 20% of men, they just behave badly because they can.
They can, yes, and so they have access to anyone they want, and these women are bouncing between them because this guy, let's say, he has 100 partners. Those 100 women are going with the other 20%,
right?
And everyone below is just
Ew.
Scraps. I mean, seriously. So there's no chase. So there's no need for testosterone as a corollary to the stimulus.
Oh, okay.
So if you exercise to get stronger muscles, you have to chase in order to get testosterone because that's the needed hormone for masculine.
So is there a physical hormonal response in the chase?
Absolutely.
Tell me about that. That's interesting to me.
So you just got to look at it from a neurocognitive perspective. So the brain is where everything originates. And so if you are tuned into a particular objective, that's going to send signals throughout the body. So there's a premotor cortex. You can, let's say you're a piano player, you know a song by heart. It's stored in the premotor cortex, and you can play that song in your mind before you physically do it with your hand. And so therefore, all the things that you physically do out in the world are preemptively done or stored in the brain. So if the brain doesn't have the signal of going out and doing the thing, it doesn't send the signal to the body to adapt to or prepare for that physical act. So derive it. If you're not going to go out and chase the woman who's in the neighborhood, why would you prepare yourself physically with testosterone to be assertive, to be physically threatening, to be all these things that you know are needed for that woman's attraction?
Okay, so how do we then hack that? Because if a young man then goes and gets in shape,
sure,
and his testosterone is on point, or he does get TRT,
yeah,
and he's prepared to do that, but he's not doing it, what's the effect?
It's sort of artificial.
Okay.
It's like preparing to be a fighter, never going into a fight or a battle.
So you just...
It's like LARPing.
I ain't got to get ready. I stay ready.
Exactly.
LARPing. You brought up LARPing. That's great.
Well, it's like, you're learning how to sword fight. You're never going to get in a sword fight.
Right. So it's like jujitsu. Just kidding.
Kind of. I love jujitsu.
I know, dude. Like you do that a lot.
Yeah.
I need to come to your Crown place there and give it a shot. I've been reluctant because I have really bad issue with this shoulder.
Dude, my shoulders are wrecked. Not because of jujitsu, but CrossFit.
Yeah. Well, mine is because of weightlifting, and I just haven't gotten it fixed, and I've kind of modified how I work out so I can address all those muscles, but there's certain ligament stuff there. But you brought up pair bonding. I find this to be interesting because I want to know from you as a doc, like exactly what is pair bonding, because I heard this interesting sort of, not statistic, but idea that plagues relationships nowadays, strictly from the standpoint of women.
Sure.
That, there's been this phrase body count is thrown around, basically the number of sexual partners that a woman has. They call it her body count. And the higher the body count, the less able she is to pair bond with newer relationships, and that pair bonding is what creates stability and longevity in relationship. Mm-hmm. And so without that connection, that hormonal chemical connection, because of having kind of burned that out with having so many sexual partners, that it makes it easier for that woman to leave. And there's a less emotional sort of reason for the stay in the relationship. Am I close on that at all? Like, do you know anything about this?
I've heard this a lot, yes. I'm very familiar with the concept, and I have opinions, as I do with everything. So to blame a high body count as something that's depleting the chemicals of bonding is kind of like the old religious thing that you're going to be like the licked cupcake.
So in your opinion, there's no basis for that?
It's not on that level. I think it's more from the perspective of that there's access. If you're a woman with a high body count, you've got game.
But do you, though? I've seen a lot of chicks like that are gross, and they brag about 30, 40, 50 dudes. Like,
fine.
Well, I'm putting that in there because it's like it doesn't. I guess I'm pushing back. Then it means you can, of course, it could make it easier
if they have a high body count. And I don't know. I'm not the truth, but here's a perspective. Sure. If they have a high body count, and here's the thing with women, evolutionary. This is one of my passion subjects that I like dive into. Yeah. Evolution, women too, but evolution for sure. So women seek resources and stability, and they'll always have a tendency to look for the highest status male. They always want.
Yeah, it's the whole dominance hierarchy.
The dominance hierarchy. So they're looking for that. We're looking for youth. We're looking for beauty. We're looking for peace. Okay.
Right.
So if a woman sees that her man is no longer meeting those needs, but they see somebody else is, it's very easy for them to jump to the higher brain.
Well, we see that now in our culture. Like,
see it all the time.
80% of divorces are initiated by women.
And they largely follow the man losing his job.
Yeah.
Because it's a resource thing. So if a woman has a high body count, she's like, I can go get the next branch. I've seen it.
Okay.
That's my perspective.
Sure.
Because I just don't think it's related to bonding. Because if a woman likes you and you've got what it takes, she's going to stay regardless of her body count.
Well, I think there's a psychological and emotional aspect of that too. Like, because I've kind of dived down this from both aspects of it. As far as because I don't have a dog in that fight. I'm just more curious in the behavior and of humans.
Yeah.
And this in the sexual aspect of that is very curious to me because I've had to overcome and still am overcoming a lot of like bullshit programming from growing up as a religious person,
Same.
And the demonization and evil of making it seem that, sex is this thing, On the flip side of it, though, I found this, and I want your opinion about this too, because I think that you would have something valuable to say. I've heard that one of the reasons why men, even though there's the virtue signal kind of guys that say it doesn't matter, that body count does matter to men in their partner, strictly because men want to be the best lover their partner's had.
Oh, absolutely.
And then from a psychological and emotional standpoint, if you know your girl has been ran through 50 times, it's a harder sell on yourself to think I'm the best she's ever had.
Sure.
And that affects the relationship in a very real way.
Sure.
Have you ever had any conversation about that, or is there any research that shows is there a chemical reason for that why a man would chemically and hormonally feel that, or is it just in his head?
Well, I think it comes back to that dominance hierarchy. Like, you want to be the top person always. That's what we all strive for. That's why we become threatening. That's why we become status driven and financially driven. And we all wish we had bigger dicks or whatever else because we want to be the best, whatever that means.
Thank you for telling us about yourself, Jacob. That was nice.
Sure. So this is what we all want. We want to be the best. Like you said, you're comparing to, well, who knows, the imagination of the previous 50.
Right.
Are you going to be the one that holds their attention? Because the man wants commitment. Why? For stability of a family. I think it's interesting to look at those core desires. Yes, we want to spread the seed, but at the same time, we also want a partner and a family.
Well, when you look at the reasons behind things like infidelity, it's never just about getting ass. No. It's an emotional thing.
Yeah.
And so there's got to be something there that makes sense from a chemical, hormonal standpoint that affects a man. Because like we've talked about with testosterone, it affects sex drive.
Sure.
Well, a man's libido is very fickle if it has certain influences that make it feel inferior.
Yeah, and there's stress involved. There's so many factors that compromise libido beyond just testosterone.
Right.
Sure.
And I believe it. I don't have any, I'm not a doctor. Like I said, I just play one on TV. But I firmly believe that there's two different kinds of sex drive. There's the physical drive that sometimes you just want to fuck and
doesn't matter.
Can't explain why.
Yeah, sure.
Like you're some puppy. And then there's an emotional sex drive where it's
absolutely,
you want that person. There's a connection with that person.
Yes. So here's a question for you. See if you have a similar answer to what I have. What's the sexiest thing about a woman?
This reminds me of a joke. A lot of people say sense of humor, but I'm going to say breast size. That's not the real answer, but
sure.
The sexiest thing about a woman is confidence, is her own understanding of her beauty, her femininity. I love a beautifully feminine woman that is okay with being feminine. Okay. That it turns me on when there's a softness to truly feminine women. It's one of the things I love about my wife is there's a softness to her femininity. It's very attractive, and it's not associated with angles of jawlines or tits or any. I mean, those can stack on to that and make it more appealing for sure. But ultimately, it's I think in our culture, in our world right now, femininity is at a all-time low.
Yeah.
And so, every woman's trying to be a dude now and I got it, I can handle it, boss babe, whatever. I want just a truly soft feminine. That's the hottest thing ever.
Let me give you a potential replacement for that.
Okay.
Desire.
A woman's desire
wants you. Is there anything hotter than that?
No. I think you're right on point with that.
Yeah. They can have all the attraction factors.
But desire is feminine.
It is. It goes with it. But I'm just saying that they can be feminine and be like, fuck you. And it's eh.
Yeah.
But if they're
that's a good point.
Oh, I want you. That's the number one thing.
Yeah.
So women's desire, hence the body count issue.
Right.
If you think somewhere in the back of their mind they're desiring something else or someone else, boom, it's over.
Yeah.
And hence our drive to be the most desirable.
Well, one of the things that's coming out of this conversation for me is just a reminder that as much as we can pontificate about why and what and when and how all this works, there's a reality that if you just get busy in making yourself better, it kind of resolves itself. You get access to higher value females, you make more money, your body's better. There's just a commitment that we need to have individually on being our best.
Yeah.
And if there's something that's really in our way, like get the help that we need to get over it.
Sure.
That's why coaching and mentorship and all these things are becoming more and more prevalent, because as humans, we're realizing, look, as beautiful as the mantra is that says, if it is to be, it's up to me, which I believe and is a very empowering mantra, there's certain things we can't do on our own.
Yeah.
That's why there's things like coaching and relationships and things, because they provide something that you can't experience by yourself.
Absolutely. And looking at what those things are that you want to portray, like what are they as a man? You want to be intelligent, physically foreboding. You want to be financially set. You want to have status among your peers or in your community. Like all these things that women desire. Yeah. Like that's really what it comes down to. Like that's what you want. So how do you get all those things, right? The coaching, the body, the diet.
Well, it takes a very oftentimes uncomfortable look at yourself.
Yeah, true.
If we bring it back to that, it's like, you started up this new clinic that, deals with men's health and testosterone as a part of it. You're an actual medical doctor. All of these things matter, but I think the seed of that starts in the mind of the individual. Yeah. Like I'm not okay with this anymore. How do I change it? Mm-hmm. And from a lot of the work that I've done, I understand it on a different level, and that the biggest shift has to happen on the identity level. People have to see themselves differently, even if there's external evidence that they're full of shit. Mm-hmm. You have to see yourself as fit, as healthy, as attractive, as wealthy, as worthy, as all of the things that it takes. And once you can then have that as an identity, it shifts up the ladder and it changes your behavior of the things you aren't willing to put up with anymore.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I've pursued over the last 15 years. Because as a gym owner years ago, I'm like, what is it about? Like, how can I help people transform? Like, I know all the nuts and bolts of diet and movement and exercise, but there's some barrier between that. And that comes down to that mindset. And so for my last 10 plus years, I've been pursuing that formula, so to speak. And that's where Your Human Experience, like the podcast that I do, Escape the Drift, is all mindset based.
Yeah.
It's that creating of yourself, being free from the way that it has always been, those patterns that don't work. And how do you get out of those patterns? And that's just like, it's a lifelong pursuit.
Thank you for that. It is a lifelong pursuit. There's no destination. You have to fall in love with the process. Yeah. And you get wins along the way, and there's certain benchmarks that you receive and that you meet, but it's lifelong. I'm glad that you brought up your podcast, because as somebody that gets to produce it and that was a part of the creation of it, like it's really, really good.
Thank you.
Escape the Drift. If you haven't, Dr. Jacob Egbert, Escape the Drift is the name of the show. It'll get you, man. It's very entrancing, the way that...
I like how you produced it, too, because it has that underlying music, the sound, and it just allows me to just give my message the way I like it.
Yeah. We came up with that idea together, and I'm glad that we were able to, like, make it work, because it's different. Like, your podcast in my, library of shows that we produce it's very unique. It has a self-development aspect to it. You're a good storyteller. You share things that are true to you and that you've proven to be true through other ways, but it's very trance-like.
Yeah.
You kind of get into it.
I'm wondering if I ever want to branch out to do interviews with it, because it has such a unique quality. If that might change the trajectory, I don't know. Well,
I don't think it would be. We wouldn't want to do the music aspect underneath that if we did interviews. But if you do, I think that if you want to do that, go ahead. Like, basically, I've said for the longest time that, you've used Escape the Drift to add relevancy to your pursuits with what you're doing with meditation and your other things, and you've talked about your thing with your new health, and you've talked about Burning Man, and there's really no holds barred on the things that you share on your show.
Sure.
Your death, that was a crazy episode.
My beautiful death.
Your beautiful death, yeah. Just wrenching the last thing out of life. Like, I love that. But you're not specifically using it to get leads for a business at this point. Like, it could, and there could be tweaks that could make that easier. But so the idea of bringing people on, there's no downside to it.
No,
it's not like you're gonna sharing that spotlight and make it to where somebody wouldn't want to be associated with you because you've already established that. Yeah. How many episodes are we in? It's
like 26 or so.
Yeah,
I forgot one this week.
I know my engineer reminds me, hey, Escape the Drift didn't get one in. I'm like, yeah, that
happens.
It happens.
I got a lot going on.
Yeah.
So I like to, so here's what I say about Escape the Drift. I'm in the business of freedom. And I have a deep commitment to that other people feel free. I don't know why. I don't know where that comes from. Other than that, as humans, we have this like tribal aspect to our physiology and our programming to keep others alive, to keep others safe. So if you're out foraging and you come across a fruit tree, you want to share that with your people. And that's kind of what I've come across. I have this transitory or transformational experience of myself where I've become more free. And it's sweet. It's like the sweetest thing I've ever experienced. And I want to share that with my people.
Right.
And so that's my motivation for the podcast currently.
How much of that transformation to that space of being willing to be free? Because it's a choice. Like you have to choose into the things that make you free.
Oh, yeah.
How much does your spouse play into that?
Amelia?
Yeah.
She is she's my truth. And what I mean by that is anytime I vary from the way things need to be or the way things work, she pulls me back. She's the guardrails to my life. And so she's my testing ground. Like if it's not working there, something's not working with me. And so if I want peace with her, something's not working over here. And I got to go to work. So the more free I am, the more honest, the more true to myself, the more things work and the more peace I have with her. So she's the bellwether for if I'm being true. So she is my truth.
So that, as I interpret what you're saying and I hear what you're saying, it would make sense then if that's the case that she doesn't limit you in ways that make you free. She supports them.
She's the complete opposite. She encouraged me to go to Burning Man by myself.
That's nuts, man.
I didn't ask to go. She's like, you should go. I'm like, by myself. She's like, yeah, I'm going to Washington. I got to go see my grandpa.
See, that is a level of trust and appreciation and acceptance in a marriage that it baffles me. Like you went to Burning Man solo, bro.
Yeah.
You're riding a bike with your junk out. Like you were all over it.
By myself. Completely by myself.
Yeah.
I had a friend there and he left within 24 hours.
Couldn't hang, or why did he leave?
He had kids. Him and his wife and their 2 babies were there, and it just got rough, so they
brought babies to Burning Man? Come on.
10 months and 3 or something. A lot of people do. There's babies there all the time. It works for a lot of people, but they were having a rough time for other reasons, and it just a lot of things conspired to where they were out.
So you were by yourself?
Literally by myself. Knew nobody.
There's a part of me that really likes the idea of that.
It was amazing.
One of my good friends that knows me really well has said that I need to learn how to be alone. That I rely too much on the association of other people. Mm. And the idea of like going to something crazy like Burning Man with all the psychedelics that are there and the opportunities to connect and the music and doing that by yourself might be, as you experienced, life-changing.
Yeah, it was for sure. I didn't do any psychedelics. I didn't do any.
I know you were sober the whole time,
to
right?
Things that I would have regretted, and it was amazing. It was beautiful for all those reasons. Wow. And I love psychedelics. Like I just didn't want to do it there.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you've never. I mean, I know you've done mushrooms, and have you done ayahuasca or any of those journeys? Okay. What's the other? Iboga, I think, is another one. But
yeah, there's a few that don't really appeal. Ayahuasca's calling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I heard of this place? There's been several of my clients actually that have gone to this place in Nashville that's called Clara Vita, and they use a synthetic version of ayahuasca.
No thanks.
Supposedly these people have these ridiculously transformational.
Oh, I'm sure they do. They're going to have the neurochemical experience.
Right.
I want to go to the deep forest and
in the jungle,
feel it.
Yeah.
I want the sounds and the smells and everything.
You know, somebody that I trust that's done a lot of those journeys said that people give too much weight to the journey, and you should look at the journey itself as like in ayahuasca as like a supplement, not as some sort of like baptism type thing. Like you're in this new transformational place and everything changes when you leave. It's like that's a dangerous way to look at it because when you don't experience that, then you need to go back more and more And it can literally have an effect on your brain if you do that stuff too much.
Yeah, to a degree. I think it's more psychological than it is neurochemical.
Sure.
But I like the idea of psychedelics as a tool, not the tool.
Yeah.
Like it's not like...
Well, yeah, like a supplement. It's like I'm going to, I take, protein or pre-workout or whatever, and it gives me a little bit of a different experience. Sure. That makes me feel and perform differently.
But you're overall committed to the journey of fitness.
Sure.
And you're doing the work outside of the pre-workout, and the pre-workout boosts. Right. That's sort of how I see psychedelics.
That makes sense. I had a really interesting, there was one time when I was tripping and I was on my back porch, and, I've been in the process of trying to develop myself into something better for most of my adult life.
Sure.
And part of that has been a regulation of my own emotions. I've really found that the people that can control their emotions can control their lives. Doesn't mean you don't feel your emotions. Doesn't mean you don't have whims of, rage and anger and lust and all of the emotions, but like you got to have them in check, Well, I was on my back porch and I was looking up the sky, and it was kind of this dark, ominous time in the sky. It was getting close to the sun going down, and so there were some clouds that were there. And I looked up, and there was this I was having a hallucination of this very evil, dark, red-eyed demon/dragon that was in the sky, and I felt fear as I was looking up in the sky feeling this. And these words came across my mind because I was I could see from my past experiences when I wasn't as evolved in certain things, that being the start of a bad part of my trip. Like freaking me out and being scared of whatever, and this thing kind of doing its deal. But I had this feeling, and these words came across my mind that says, find the beauty. So I'm looking at this and I'm like starting to see what the eyes of this gargoyle looking thing are gorgeous and they're red, and I start to see the scales and the stuff, and it was a very vivid experience. And the second though that I started finding appreciation in what it was, it shifted to become this like this lion with this gold mane, and the sunset started, and it was this, and in that moment I'm like, oh, I did that in that moment. Like I took the shift from it turning down this road of fear, and because of the beauty of it. And I realized that, like you're saying, so I was able to do that because of the own control I had in that moment, and that had been because of years of work. Because I've had bad trips before where it got a little nutty and scary, but that was a long time ago,
So you did the work, but something whispered to you what to do.
Yeah. I've always wondered where that came from. I had a vision recently in a breathwork session that I did that I talked about on this very podcast. And I don't hear audible things in meditation or when I'm tripping very much.
Yeah.
I rarely have visual visions. I have to take a lot to be able to hallucinate when it comes to that stuff.
Okay.
And so having those type of things, like I wonder where the source of it was, where did it come from? Like this manufacturing of like a motion picture in my mind, or like an audible voice that says, find the beauty.
Yeah. I have one experience of an audible voice so I did mushrooms for the first time. I did like 2 grams, and I got one message, and it was, go deeper. That's it.
Take more.
Just literally just said, go deeper.
Yeah.
So the next time I did like 5 grams. That was deep.
That's a bunch.
It was an experience. That was beautiful.
They call that a heroic dose.
Yeah. It was.
I always laugh at that name. Where did they come up with the name heroic dose to say that's how much mushroom you take? Are you going through a journey there, buddy? You gonna rise from the ashes at the end of that thing?
Who knows? Maybe it's what it feels like. It's like you go in many different directions, or at least I did.
Yeah.
I was the hero, and then I was like the grossest version of me of all time, and I got to see it all.
Wow. I've enjoyed, I really love listening to music when I'm in those states. I remember one time really diving into Jimi Hendrix while I was on psychedelics, listening. And I felt like I was hearing the versions of the songs he intended.
That's a good choice.
It was like a 3D set of glasses that I put on, and I could finally like see and hear Jimmy's music through the lens of the trip.
He's one of those musicians that, I think we talked about this when you were at dinner the other night. There are those that play music from the subconscious. And then there are those that are the technicians. And most people are technicians.
Yeah.
You have the music and you play the beat on time. And then there are those that just play with their soul. And he's one of those, I would say.
Yeah. I think he's one of those that understands. he utilizes his technique to be able to.
Oh, you've got to have the technique as the tool, but I think he just like whatever powers within just goes for it.
Yeah,
and
he's such a unique person to consider his popularity at the time that he was, and him being black and in rock and the whole. I mean, just what a revolutionary man.
Yeah,
I had the privilege of visiting his grave in Seattle one time, and it was kind of a crazy experience.
He was only 27 when he died, right?
Yeah, he was really young. Yeah, it's like in Renton or something, suburb of Seattle, and it's really well cared for. Like there, people put flowers there all the time, and
especially up there. Yeah,
it's kind of cool. Good old Jimmy. So we have a segment of this when we wrap it up for current events, where we our producer over here gives us some ideas, and we usually make fun of it. Is what we end up. We talk shit on what's happening in this world.
I have opinions. I can
pretend
I know stuff.
So what's up, Captain Parker? What do you got today?
Well, we went a lot of places this podcast, so let's start with something light.
Perfect.
How about a porn Zoom bomb forces cancellation of Federal Reserve event?
Wait, say that again. Porn?
A porn Zoom bomb.
What is
they're having a Zoom meeting.
So they're having a huge Zoom meeting. It has 200 people, and someone had gotten the password from somebody, hacked it, whatever. And it you know how you can like set it to like mute everybody. None of these controls were on. It was just like an open Zoom meeting. This guy came in and started blasting stuff.
Oh,
there's no video, but it got shut down in 2 minutes. So,
2 minutes. That's about right.
Long enough for you.
Hey,
I could be. Yeah,
that's hilarious, dude. That's the type of hacking I can get behind because it doesn't seem truly malicious. It just seems like he's punking these dudes.
So here's what would be most entertaining with this is to just sit and watch all the videos of the people's reactions.
Oh, their faces like what?
In which people are like, I recognize that one,
or people that like. I wonder if there were certain people in that Zoom that thought something on their computer was now black, and they're like, "Oh fuck," and like, "Oh, what's it mean?" That's what happened. That's hilarious. So this was on a government Zoom meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Federal Reserve.
So that's ironic because usually they're the ones doing the fucking. Anyway, zing. All right, what else you got?
Okay. SpaceX launched their Falcon rocket this week, and I know you're a big Elon fan, so I just wanted to bring that up. They brought U.S., Russia, and the first Arab astronaut into the space station, and it went off without a hitch.
So SpaceX Falcon orbited and was able to drop people off of a satellite? Dude, that's awesome.
So they included a U.S., Russian, and Arab.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
I've heard that joke.
They're replacing
what's the punchline of that joke?
They do science in space.
A U.S., a Russian, and an Arab entered a rocket.
Well, Elon doesn't care about politics.
Yeah, he's just about. One of the things I love about Elon Musk is that he has this like optimistic viewpoint of humanity.
You have to.
Yeah,
that's a creator.
He's great. He's so great.
Yeah, I love what he's doing.
But dude, how crazy is that to think like this dude just decided to make rockets, and now they're like linking up with space stations with Arabs in it. You know what I mean?
I think he's the best example in modern time of what's possible. Like when you think of like things that are possible, he's just doing it.
Yeah.
And like what an example to pattern your own goals after.
Yeah. I remember reading I think it was him that was attributed to this quote. He was talking about the idea of like 10xing things, because that's like a hip thing, like 10x, whatever. And he's like, no, 100x your goals. He's like, there's no competition at 100.
Right.
Everybody's trying to 10x their shit.
He has this quote that I love. It's like, look at your plan for 10 years and see if you can do it in 6 months.
Yeah.
See how far you get.
Have you done Upgrade before, the stuff with William Lamb?
No, I'm very familiar with the Peripheral. I've watched it forever.
You just inspired me it reminded me of something that William has said. So like a part of like the goal setting and the things you do with Upgrade is creating associated and dissociated states for the things that you want to enjoy. And so and that you would like to achieve. And so in order to do that, you have to know. And so like he has these exercises where you like will write a list of 100 material items that you would like to enjoy or 100 experiences that you'd like to enjoy. And he talks about creating a 90-year plan for your life. Mm-hmm. And I pushed back. I'm like, I'm 47, dude. I'm not going to live to be 150. He's like, no. He's like, you create this plan that could outlive you. And what happens is that your subconscious mind realizes that time isn't the thing that gets you this plan, it's creation. And it just starts putting stuff together very quickly. And he's like, if you really want to achieve high level, like write a 90-year plan for your life and then watch that stuff start happening in 4 or 5, 10 years.
Yeah.
Because now he made this other comment that was really impactful. He said, your goals have to be so big that the idea of working harder is irrelevant to achieve them. Because our minds will be like, well, if I just work harder, if I just do this, I can get there. We got to remove that. It's got to be so audaciously big that no matter how hard you could work, it's not going to matter. So things would have to shift. You would have to become different experiences and people would have to come into your life. You would have to align energetically with certain like it changes the format and the game plan of how you actually would achieve. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
And Elon espouses a lot of that stuff too. Like the idea of like rocket Tesla, like he's talking about how like Tesla has the capacity with batteries to like handle the, United States. Like if you had like a, corner of some shit state like Utah, take one of the corners of the state, have it be all batteries and solar panels and stuff, and it could handle all of our energy needs.
Yeah. Well, who would have thought of that?
Elon.
Exactly.
Somebody that cares, that's not on the dole from, some other thing to get paid.
Sure. Well, and look what follows him, the success and the money and everything else.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you create
crazy
those.
chicks. Have you seen the chicks he's dated? They're out of their mind.
Yeah, look at you got a picture of him up there.
Must have a USB for a vagina. All right, so what's the what else you got here? You got any more?
Yeah. This one I just thought was really funny. Shoe polish stands begin to vanish. I was born in '98, and I've never seen a shoe polish stand. And they posted this 16 hours ago.
So you're like feeling this has already happened. You're like, this is old news.
I was just shocked what the Associated Press thought was fit to print.
Interesting. I'm trying to remember the last place I saw a shoe polish. I think it was actually in a casino in Vegas.
Yeah. I've seen them in airports.
Yeah. Nobody polishes their shoes anymore.
I do.
I
have like one pair.
So you're the guy?
Well, I don't polish them like shiny. I like put shoe polish on because like if I have a black leather boot that needs some scuffs removed, I'll polish them.
Yeah, I used to do that too. As a missionary and whatnot, you had to.
Oh yeah.
That's crazy. Well, I guess it makes sense. I'm more curious, what are they replacing them with? Because there's definitely a kiosks that are unmanned now that were once shoe polish places.
Vape vending machines, maybe.
Right.
There you go. Well, nobody wears shoes that need to be polished. A few guys, but
it's like a wealthy thing to have like really nice shoes that need to be polished. Like it's nobody wears them. They're uncomfortable as fuck too.
The wealthy guys that have shoe polishable shoes have more pairs of shoes than are required to polish.
Right.
Because it's back in the day when you had one pair of shoes and you had to keep them looking good.
That's true. Like as a missionary, you got freaking 2 pair or whatever. You gotta.
Yeah, I think I had one that I wore. I wore them every day.
You went on a mission?
Yeah.
Where'd you go?
Netherlands.
The Netherlands.
Yeah.
Okay.
Debauchery land.
It is, huh?
Yeah, it was rough.
It was rough. That's what planted the Burning Man seed for you, huh?
That place is gross, though.
Oh.
Yeah. Like red light districts and I don't know. I didn't like it.
Yeah. Interesting. So that's not, why am I'm having like a mind freeze about that part of Europe. That's not Amsterdam, is it? Mm-hmm. So Amsterdam is in the Netherlands.
Amsterdam is a city within the Netherlands, which is just north of Belgium, which is next to Germany. It's kind of on the corner, and you go across the strait and you get to England.
Okay.
So
yeah, that makes sense. I had a buddy of mine in the last year go to Amsterdam, and all he could tell me was he did this when he was like, bro. That's how he described what he saw. I go, okay.
Yeah, I think here's an interesting thing about the world, state of the world, similar to the dating, like everybody has access to everybody. Do you remember when things were interesting? Like there were faraway lands that you didn't know much about.
Yeah.
And now you've seen every corner of the earth in HD. Like you can go to any jungle, any forest, any city and watch 4K imagery of it.
You know what? This is interesting. I think that is what contributes to a lot of the anti-American sentiment, because they don't realize that even though it looks the same or better or whatever in other countries, the experience of living there is
vastly different.
Nothing like it is here.
Yeah.
I really feel a lot of the people that have it out for demonizing what America is and the foundation of what we were and everything, they've never traveled outside of this country.
Well, they're also coddled by the ease of what we've created.
Yeah.
I think that's the other side of it.
Well, they don't realize the tentativeness of if that goes away, it changes everything. America really is the last bastion of a lot of things that if it goes away, dude, we're fucked.
Look how close we came with the COVID stuff.
Yeah.
Like a reality.
Well, they're still even trying that. Like I saw a thing where, and I don't have proof of this, but it was an article that I saw that said that Biden signed over some piece of something to the World Health Organization for the next pandemic. I'm like, oh no, he didn't. And the fact check was like, well, he didn't sign over sovereignty, but there's this. And I'm like, dude, that's treason right there. Like, what are you doing?
No accountability.
No accountability. Come on, man. Anyway, well, dude, I've really enjoyed this chat. We went a lot of different places, man.
Everywhere, right?
Hopefully we don't get canceled for speaking truth. We won't be.
I'm uncancelable.
Me too.
I'm just going to say it.
I don't give a shit enough.
Like, if you don't want to work with me because of how I feel, thank you.
That's a good point, huh? We're getting to that point where, like, from a marketing aspect, we all curate our own audiences and we all curate our own interests, and it's getting that way in business. There are certain people that just won't do business with other people because of their politics or their opinions, and that's really crazy to me.
Yeah. Where I am at risk, and this is where I was really concerned to bring it full circle to the pandemic, is that my license is tied to state protocols, et cetera.
Right.
And so that is a risk I have. They could cancel me, and I'm not very good at many other things.
Yeah.
I figured out.
You're harmless. They're not going to do anything to you.
No, I know. I'm just saying that's the one area where somebody could pull the rug right out from under me.
Right.
So actually, I was at risk of losing my job during the pandemic, literally, had I not. So here's what it was. I got a religious exemption from the vaccine because I didn't get the full vaccine.
Yeah.
So where I worked prior to moving here, they fired doctors, didn't have exemptions. So I would have been fired.
Which, had that happened, you'd be embroiled in a lawsuit right now that would be getting you paid in a moment, because there's going to be some serious,
there better be
some serious reconciliation of that stuff, or losing your job over a vaccine that didn't even work.
So all these people during those early days of being like, I don't wear a mask, this or that, it's like, good for you in your unencumbered financial state. I have bills to pay and kids to feed, and I don't have a lot of options. If you take away my medical practice, I go from high income to zero, real fast.
Right.
There aren't a lot of jobs for unlicensed doctors.
Just sell drugs.
Well, I'm trying right now. No.
All right, so where do people go find your new deal?
So you can look at my Instagram's probably my hub right now. So Dr. Jacob Egbert.
Okay.
But that's my personal page where there are links to Primal Mountain Medical. So primal.mountain.medical on Instagram, or website primalmountainmedical.com.
Okay.
And of course, Your Human X is also my mindset training.
Are you required to be local to have you as the doctor for this?
Yes. Unfortunately, I guess you have to be in Utah State because that's the state I'm licensed in.
Okay.
And so currently I operate on telemedicine. Like I can just do a Zoom call. That's it. We can start.
So how do we get that? How do we have that change for you? Because like I know for myself, like I have like a men's doctor and I've done that, and they're in California and they send me stuff here for medicine.
I have to get licensed throughout the country,
which
is a future plan. But here's the thing. The DEA, just a quick little update, the DEA is taking away the telemedicine benefits of COVID starting in May. So you have to have a physical visit with your patient to start prescribing testosterone.
That sucks.
So if you're grandfathered in, you're in, but new patients will all have to be physically seen by me or referred by their doctor, which most doctors don't like to refer for this.
One of my clients, a different one of my clients, she runs the medical weight loss up in Ogden. And she actually isn't a doctor. Her dad was one, and she's really sharp and understands medicine. And she might as well be a doctor. She's got enough research and schooling, and so she has doctors on staff that like do all the prescriptions and stuff. But she's pretty revolutionary in that. I helped her with her podcast because, specific to men, like there's a lot of, like you talk about what a normal testosterone level would be, right? Well, a lot of the things that she deals with on the women's side are things like PCOS and thyroid issues and things. And what normal isn't even remotely close to what it should be. She's like, there's normal, a scale that's like, you could be normal for an 80-year-old and you're 27. Do you want to be normal for an 80-year-old? And she's taken that. She actually had to kind of get some of her medical professionals that are on her staff on board with that because they were so traditionally trained. And she's like, look, consider this. And she's so sharp. Her name is Tiffany Christensen.
Okay.
And she's actually who I have my testosterone. I get my stuff through her clinic.
Good.
She's great.
Yeah, if you were to treat normal as normal, which many doctors do, they'll have men come in at 290 testosterone and be like, "You're normal."
Yeah.
I'm like, "No, let's see you at 900."
Yeah.
Let's see you feeling amazing, 1200 even.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's the thing is that, I want to be great for 25 at 47. Like, give me 1200 all day long.
Yeah. Forever.
Yeah. Forever. Yeah.
That's my goal. Like, I look at these old guys like Stallone,
They're so awesome.
I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to be jacked at 70.
Yeah. Well, it's possible, dude. Like,
oh, it's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm not, of course, like, I fully believe it. I'm the same way, dude. It's like, I don't ever want to be jacked like that, but like, I want to like have, I want to look like one of those 300 guys for as long as I can.
Yeah.
I don't need to be the biggest muscles,
not like enormous. No, that's not my goal either, but yeah.
Anyway. Well, dude, this has been a pleasure. Thank you for your time, Doc.
Yeah.
And like you said, go follow him on Instagram, Dr. Jacob Egbert. I'm going to put that in the show notes so you can just click on it. And if you're here in Utah, go to Primal
Mountain Medical.
Primal Mountain Medical. All right, just real quick. Dudes, if you aren't actively monitoring your testosterone, you're doing it at your peril. Life is so much better. I can't even tell you how it translates to quality of life. All the things, sex drive, vitality, the way you feel in your body, brain fog, everything is affected by your tea. So give Jacob a call. Anyway, thanks everybody for listening to Stand Up. We're out of here.